to welcome all of you, along with all of our, many of our members of our staff who are here with us this evening, to the 48th Annual Environmental Congress and the second virtual Environmental Congress. So welcome, welcome. We miss seeing all of your faces. We know many of you have messaged us to say that you're thankful we are doing this virtually this year. We have some amazing sessions, which we will preview towards the close of this session, scheduled for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And as we did last year, at a later date, we will be posting these sessions to our YouTube channel at ANJAC Views. So you're welcome to go ahead and view them there. We encourage you to join us on Twitter at ANJAC Tweets to chat about the sessions throughout the week and use the hashtag EnviroCongress. So we have lots of ANJAC staff. We have our communications manager, Julie, Cheryl, Nandini Checo, Elizabeth Ritter, Sheila Baker-Grajal, and other staff who are in attendance. You can't see them this evening. And so thank you for being here with us. A little bit of techie. Alex stole my thunder a little bit earlier, so you guys know where the bathrooms are. I'm sure you can find the refreshments and the coffee or tea as you need it. We would like to use the Q&A option for questions tonight. We tried to disable the chat. Zoom said we did, and alas, it still appears. So if we can try to keep the questions for our speakers posted in the Q&A, that will just help us keep track of where things are posted. If you forget, it's not the end of the world. We'll find you. If you are having extreme technical difficulty and you can't figure out how to use Zoom or can't see something, as an emergency, go ahead and you can call our Deputy Director, Liz Ritter. There's a cell phone number there, or you can try to post in the Q&A and we can try to troubleshoot with you. To let you all know, these sessions are being recorded and, as I said, will be posted on our YouTube channel at ANJAC Views. And a link will be sent to all the attendees. So if you have other members of your environmental commission who weren't able to attend, then please go ahead and share that link with them. I would like to offer words of extreme gratitude for our sponsors this year. We have gold, silver, and bronze sponsors this year that make this event possible, that help to offset the cost of it so that we can bring it to you at less than an at-cost charge. And these sponsors really help us do work year-round to provide resources, technical support, and assistance to environmental commissions throughout the state of New Jersey in all 21 counties. I would also like to thank our other business sponsors and, of course, our foundation support from foundations throughout the Garden State that make our work possible and make us available to you for oh so many years to continue to improve and protect our local environment and to do the work that you do for the benefit of your communities. As you know, ANJAC is here as a resource for environmental commissions, municipal officials, concerned citizens throughout the state. We are very proud to have registration from environmental commissions in all 21 counties. And I'm also very proud to announce that we have broken an Environmental Congress record, and we have more than 350, and the number keeps going up every time I look, people registered for this year's Environmental Congress. So while we miss seeing you in person, and we promise we will be back in person with some option for a virtual hybrid event in the future, we are just thrilled to have you here with us this year. Thank you to our co-sponsors, nonprofits and state agencies throughout this great state of ours that are presenting and moderating and coordinating, and our resources as well for environmental commissions throughout the state of New Jersey. Environmental Congress would not be possible without you. Thank you. And we'd also like to encourage you, if you can, to make a donation to ANJAC so that we can continue to be there for you, to provide one-on-one assistance, to provide site plan application review, to offer our small grants to ECs throughout the state. Your funding really does make a huge difference. ANJAC is a nonprofit organization. We do not receive state funding. We are supported by donations from you and foundations throughout the state of New Jersey. So we thank you for your support, and we thank you for being here this evening with us. With that, it is also my great privilege to introduce the Candy Ashman Environmental Legacy Award. Many of us knew Candy Ashman very well. She passed away last year, and we were privileged to have her as ANJAC's first executive director and to create this award while she was with us in her honor because of the tremendous legacy that she left for us here in the state. Many of you also knew our dear Abby Fair, who worked with ANJAC for many, many years. And we are privileged to honor her this evening. And I'd like to turn it over to somebody who knew her much better than I did, although I was very much inspired by her in working particularly on water issues. I wanted to work on clean water issues, and Abby taught me to work on clean water issues, you got to work on the dirty water issues. And she taught me more than just about anybody who has mentored me in the state. And I'm just very privileged to have known her. With that, I will exit and ask Sandy Batty if you could share a few words about Abby and introduce the Candy Ashman Award in honor of Abby.
Okay, thanks, Jen, very much. Thinking about it, it's fitting that ANJAC gives its Environmental Legacy Award to Abigail Fair because she was a person who truly left our state a legacy of environmental protection, safeguarding water resources through local and state policy. Though Abby's no longer with us, she passed away last May. She's well remembered by all who worked with her during her 22 years at ANJAC. In fact, to me, it's a testament to her true legacy that 11 years after she retired, she is still so well respected and missed by New Jersey's environmental community. Abby directed ANJAC's Water Resources Program, as Jen mentioned, working on a range of water protection issues, from stormwater to septic systems to wastewater planning, stream protection. She continually researched and learned, and always with the goal of better protecting state waters. On the state level, before joining ANJAC, Abby had coordinated the Freshwater Wetlands Campaign, leading a coalition of 100 organizations that succeeded in passage of the landmark New Jersey Freshwater Protections Act. Later at ANJAC, she authored a comprehensive manual to help municipal officials understand the new wetlands law. Abby also analyzed lots of other DEP regulatory proposals and developed constructive comments to improve the rules. She enlisted the help of environmental organizations to take a united stand to strengthen the state proposals on issues like wetlands, flood hazard areas, stormwater management, and sewer service areas. On the local level, Abby supported the environmental commissioners and other municipal officials. She had practical expertise gained by serving in Chatham Township as a longtime member of the planning board and as an elected member of the Township Committee and as mayor. Using this experience, Abby was always willing to help environmental commissioners when they called or emailed with questions or asked for advice. In our office, her energy and passion for the environment were contagious. We all worked a little harder with Abby as our inspiration. In June, the New Jersey Conservation Foundation published an article about Abby's contributions. As it captured her so well, I'll end by quoting it. Passion for the environment, talent for absorbing and analyzing information, willing to work hard, desire to share knowledge, and a determination to make a difference. Combine these qualities with a big smile and a dose of humility, and you get Abigail Fair. I thank ANJAC for giving Abby this award.
Thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate that. I know you knew Abby really well, as many of us did. I think I was remiss in saying, but you go without introduction. So Sandy was our previous executive director, and it speaks to the strength of the environmental commission community that ANJAC supports, and ANJAC's staff and volunteers, that we have Sandy with us as a co-chair of our advisory board. And I'm just pleased that you could be here tonight. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks.
Okay, So as Abby's memory and certainly Candy's memory lives on in all of us and the work that we do, we want to celebrate the work that municipal leaders are doing across the state. So we posed a challenge this year to environmental commissioners. I'm realizing, Sheila, you need to share your screen, so let me stop. To nominate municipal officials from around the state of New Jersey who are leading from their elected positions on environmental issues that are important to your community. So we're going to take a minute and recognize 6 individuals for their leadership. And again, these nominees come directly from environmental commissioners. So we're particularly proud of this outstanding work. So I believe the first one is from Evesham. Evesham, we are proud to recognize with a Municipal Environmental Leadership Award, Patricia Hansen, who's a councilwoman in the township. Evesham Councilwoman Patricia Hansen has had quite an impact since she took office in January 2019. In that time, she worked on enhancing stormwater regulations, facilitated the passage of balloon release and backyard chicken ordinances, advocated for green infrastructure, preserving open space, participated in cleanups and tree giveaways, and advocated for the purchase of 2 electric police vehicles and EV chargers. Thank you, Councilwoman, for your work. Next, we have Fairlawn, which we'd like to recognize with our Municipal Environmental Leadership Award. The nominee is Gail Rostenstrich. She's a council member there. Fairlawn council member has involved herself in all sorts of sustainability issues. She is a planning board member, a council liaison to the Green Team, open space, shade tree advisory, aging friendly, community garden, and garden committees. She joined forces with the Fairlawn Environmental Commission, or the Fairlawn EC as the council liaison. I'm sorry. Gail joined forces with the Fairlawn EC council liaison, Chris Kraus, initiating periodic combined committees and meetings. This has increased stakeholder dialogue, enhanced team building, and reinvigorated conversation around quality of life and environmental issues in Fairlawn. Her involvement includes, but is not limited to, working on reusable bag ordinances and distributing reusable bags, addressing invasive species, including bamboo, doubling down on tree planting with increasing the budget, working on a 5-year town tree plan, and decisions informed by best management practice guidelines on sustainability and brownfield development. She's also engaged with environmental preservation and enhancement, promoted and worked at the Fairlawn Styrofoam collection event. Thank you, Councilwoman. Next, we have Lambertville. We'd like to recognize with our Mayor's Honorary Circle recognition for Mayor Julia Fall. Mayor Fall has been a constant support for the work of the Lambertville Environmental Commission. Specifically, she supported the implementation of Ditching Disposables initiative. This campaign had many facets: repurposed a t-shirt workshop, sustainable business forum, community canvassing, sustainability lecture on zero waste lifestyle choices, plastic ordinances, posters, postcards, green building certification or green business certification, sustainable business awards, sustainable library, and sustainable story time. Ditching Disposals animated video, that was a lot of fun, and water bottles for Lambertville Public School. Also of note, her commitment to the purchase and preservation of the Clausen Farm, the last remaining tract of open space in Lambertville. This summer, the city purchased the historically significant 8.5 acre property with the intention of preserving the land and creating additional open community space. Thank you, Mayor Fall. Lebanon Township, we would like to recognize Mayor Michael Schmidt of Lebanon Township. Over the past 2 decades, the Lebanon Township Committee has partnered with the Lebanon Township Environmental and Open Space Committee to preserve thousands of acres of forested land, protecting natural resources and supporting healthy ecosystems. During his 6-year tenure on the Township Committee and currently serving as mayor, Mike Schmidt has attended nearly every Environmental and Open Space Committee meeting, serving as the Open Space Coordinator and advocating for the protection of open space. In 2019, with Mike's thoughtful encouragement, the EOSC explored how to best manage the forested lands to allow for some recreation and protect local water quality and biodiversity. Mike facilitated the creation of the Lebanon Township Ordinance that permitted deer hunting on some open space parcels. He worked with the EOSC on the design of a deer management program. Under the mayor's leadership, the Township Committee unanimously passed a resolution that allowed deer hunting on select municipal lands. The program will begin to limit deer population that is causing damage to forested municipal lands. This is the first step in creating a thoughtful public land management plan. Thank you, Mayor. Next, we have Livingston, our mayor's honorary circle recognition for Dr. Sean Klein, mayor of Livingston. During his 8 years as council member and mayor, Dr. Sean Klein has reduced Livingston's carbon footprint and greened their building requirements. The mayor led the creation of Livingston's energy aggregation program, providing renewably generated electricity for 30,000 Livingston residents. Livingston was first in New Jersey to deliver 100% renewable energy as an option on a municipal scale, eliminating up to 10,000 tons of CO2 annually. The mayor also advanced electric vehicle charging and negotiated voluntary green construction practices with developers. He supports recycling programs for electronics, metal, and type 1 through 7 plastics. Dr. Klein leads Livingston as they add green acre space, trails, and canoe routes to continue careful stewardship of their water and parks. Thank you, Mayor Klein. And last, but certainly not least, we have a nomination from Madison for a Municipal Collaboration Award, Mayor Robert Conley. Over the last 2 years, Mayor Robert Conley's support and collaboration direction has been critical to the success of many environmental initiatives in Madison and Morris County. The mayor worked with the local EC to pass a 4-town plastic bag ban, host a 10-town sustainable affordable housing event, and kick off regional EC working groups on climate, green building, pollinators, and pesticides, and green fleets. In 2019, Mayor Connolly hosted an Anjac plastic bag information session held in Madison and attended by a robust audience of more than 100 people representing multiple municipalities. His leadership brought neighboring mayors, council members, and the state legislators together. He led a breakfast group for elected officials and helped the EC create partnerships that 2 years hence routinely leads events like joint township-wide yard sales, compost bin sales, and this spring's EV Expo held in Madison, where 4 neighboring mayors spoke out about their EV infrastructure goals. The multi-town EC coalition that resulted from the plastic bag partnerships, the North Jersey Sustainable Municipal Alliance, had its biggest success this spring, a native plant sale that created an estimated 2,275 square yards of native habitat. Spread across 10 towns and multiple counties, the sale demonstrated that thinking beyond Madison's borders and their 4 square miles can have a huge impact. Thank you, Mayor Connolly. Thank you to all the elected officials recognized this evening, and for all of you who we weren't able to recognize. We see you, we appreciate you, and we are here to support your leadership. Thank you, thank you. And With that, I would like to get to the primary speaker this evening. And it is my intense privilege to welcome Surili Patel to speak with us this evening. Surili, I will just start by saying ANJAC staff heard Surili speak and brought her to me. Multiple ANJAC staff members said, we have to have her to Congress. Our EC members have to hear her. So we're thrilled that she agreed to be here with us this evening. Surili held a visionary leadership position at the American Public Health Association. She's currently with the Metropolitan Group. When she was at American Public Health Association, she drove strategic development to bridge the gap between public health practice and sound policies. As the director of the Center for Climate Health Equity, she inspired action by public health professionals and advanced policy agendas that address health at the nexus of climate and equity. As deputy director for the Center for Public Health, she elevated the association's environmental health program to the national stage. Surili is a trusted voice in public health who champions diversity and works to advance health equity and environmental justice. She is here to speak to us this evening as we are all working very hard to center the issues of advancing environmental justice and equity in the work that we are doing to combat the climate crisis, to foster additional clean energy, to reduce the impacts of flooding, to make more livable communities for all of us, but particularly by centering the conversations and the concerns of the overburdened communities that have been identified in New Jersey's recent environmental justice law. I'm thrilled to have Surili with us here this evening, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It is my absolute pleasure. I'm going to try to share a screen with you if I can get a thumbs up when you see this.
Yep, we've got it.
All right, thank you. You know, it's been this many years or months on Zoom, and we're still navigating it. Again, thank you so much for the invitation to offer a keynote at your annual conference, and thank you for all that you do to protect the environment and the people of New Jersey, as well as all the visitors through the state. I'm very impressed with all the awardees of today, and I can only imagine that scratches the surface of what everyone in this group does. Again, I'm Surili Patel. I am a vice president at the Metropolitan Group, and I'm speaking from the unceded Piscataway land, the original home of Piscataway Conoy tribe and Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, now known as Montgomery County, Maryland. Just a little bit about my current role. I work for a full service strategy and creative agency that works exclusively with public agencies, nonprofits, foundations, and socially responsible businesses. We are a certified B Corp and are committed to social change, which is where you'll hear a lot of my passion coming through. And to start us off, I wanted to share a parable from childhood that really has just sat with me as I pick apart the complex nature of our climate challenges of today. So in this version of the parable, it's set to begin on the 5th day of an intense heat wave, where suddenly cloud of smoke descends upon a city downwind from somewhere unknown. And 3 people from 3 different neighborhoods of this city were elected to investigate how the inescapable heat and the choking smoke were linked and what can be done. The first person came from a well-to-do community and had a chauffeur drive them in a car. While they were both shielded from the extreme heat, the smoke obstructed their visibility through the car windshield. And the second person came from a densely populated community where people rolled on bikes or scooters or skateboards. And the second person hopped onto their bike and took off towards what looked like the source of the smoke. Obviously, the visibility was certainly a problem, but it was also the smoke which made it harder for the cyclist to get enough air to pedal, not to mention the extreme heat they were experiencing. And the third person in this scenario came from a community that relied on public transportation. But since the source of the smoke appeared to be outside the city limits, there was no public transportation option. So this person took off on foot. And the visibility, poor air, and extreme heat immediately affected the walkers' journey. And since they were on foot, the journey took even longer, thus exposed more time in the poor conditions. So after a while, the three of them converged on the same path. And since the smoke limited their visibility, they didn't really know how the others got there, but they all agreed that the heat and the smoke were too much for them to bear and their communities to bear, and that something had to be done. So together they continued forward on the path before them. But soon they stumbled upon a large, unknown obstruction in the road. The obstacle was so large that they couldn't continue on their path together. And so they decided to split up and come back together on the other side to share what they found. So first went the car. They were able to weave through this obstruction, almost making it to the front, but was stopped by a big puddle. It appeared to be a large spout of water flooding the path before them. But because they were in a car, they simply drove right through and thought how nice that cool water might feel against their hot skin, or how it could quench their thirst. Though, because of the diminished visibility, both the driver and the passenger couldn't quite gauge the depth or the width of the puddle, but it didn't really matter to them because they were in a car. The next person that followed was a cyclist, slowly behind the car, but had to stop to seek refuge under a large pillar-like structure that offered shade. The cyclist thought about how the active community they came from might enjoy breaks from the heat or the smoke if they too had pillars throughout their neighborhood. Then the walker on foot decided to climb over the obstruction to get above the smoke. Instead, the higher they climbed, the hotter it got. Taking a pause on the climb to the top, the walker observed how hot it was at the higher altitude. But finally, when they reached the top, they found refuge from the breeze passing through and wondered if somehow the breeze could be bottled in an indoor air center that others in the community could enjoy as well. By the time each of them made it past the obstruction, they had in their minds made up what their respective neighborhoods needed to seek reprieve from that heat and the smoke. The passenger first spoke up and proudly said that the solution would be to open up spouts like the one they came across for recreation during these hot days. The other two asked how the water would be turned off once it started to pour in. The passenger didn't bother wondering about the consequences of excess water, since in their neighborhood, everyone had a car, and some even had drivers to drive through or around any excess water. Did you notice the solution didn't address smoke? Then the cyclist very conclusively said, the only solution is to plant tall, leafy trees where bicyclists can take breaks on their journey. But the car passenger immediately objected because these trees would take up valuable real estate that could be repurposed for roads and parking lots. And the person on foot, the walker, asked how their community could also get coverings, but nobody was listening. The walker hesitantly then said that the breeze felt at the top of the obstruction felt like a nice gift to give to those who don't otherwise have access to natural or manufactured cooling. The first two ignored the suggestion because they knew that their tax dollars would be going to an effort they themselves would not benefit from. Rather than taking a step back to identify and name the entirety of the obstruction, as well as learn from the others on the same path to discovering solutions, by the time each of them focused on the problem and the solution directly before them to benefit themselves and their neighbors alone. In the original parable, the teaching that has stuck with me the longest has been the failure to understand other truths will be our greatest limitation in realizing the absolute whole truth. There's so much to unpack in this version of The Elephant and the Blind Man, but I hope that you at least walk away with some of these observations that may apply during the climate crisis as a matter of our health and the health of our children and grandchildren. First is to look at the big picture, not the immediate problem and its potential solution, and to learn from the various perspectives and disciplines that work together towards solutions. And this one's the most important. The potential and obvious solutions may have unintended consequences. So before I go into more about climate and health, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that climate events are happening all around the country, and that many of you in New Jersey have personally experienced a climate-related weather event. I've heard flooding is a major concern in New Jersey. So I welcome you to share in the chat, if you wish, how the climate event has impacted your life, has impacted your health in particular, or the health of someone you absolutely care about. And as you do that, I'm gonna keep talking. So as a reminder, climate change describes a change in the average conditions, such as average temperature and rainfall, and a region over a long period of time. According to NASA scientists, who have observed the Earth's surface is warming, and many of the warmest years on record have happened in the past 20 or so years. The climate has been changing long before humans came into the picture, but now scientists have noticed more unusual and rapid changes. For example, Earth's average temperature has increased more quickly over the last 150 years. Climate change is also sped up by human activity. So when we burn fossil fuels, we release CO2. That's what we call greenhouse gases. And that CO2 then builds up in the atmosphere and temperatures increase. And that atmosphere becomes an invisible blanket, and it traps the heat from the sun. So climate change involves the lasting disruptions of the planet's environmental systems across the globe, including weather patterns, temperature increases, and so on. And to mention that some of these weather-related changes include increased floods and droughts, wildfires, intense storms, heat waves, sea level rise, and so much more. And these conditions have far-reaching environmental, societal, agricultural, and economic effects that are all too harmful to the health and well-being of people. Climate change impacts every part of the world and has different impacts on different areas. Here's some examples. Extreme precipitation. We see that heavy downpours across the US, especially in the Midwest and Northeast, are happening. And the downpours can cause flooding that puts lives at risk and damage homes, schools, businesses, as well as infrastructure like our roads and dams and the electric grid. And on the other side of the country, we're experiencing wildfires, right? Who don't get enough rain. And those dry conditions make wildfires even more dangerous because of the climate. In the West, is starting to experience an earlier spring that lasts later into the fall and burn more land. And of course, we've heard about hurricanes. The intensity and frequency during the North Atlantic hurricane season has increased since the early 80s, and we're getting bigger storms more often that does much more damage. And these are just a few examples. The impacts from climate change are happening now, as many of us have already experienced. And these impacts extend well beyond an increase in temperature affecting ecosystems and communities throughout the US and around the world. Things that we depend on and value, like water, energy, transportation, wildlife, ecosystems, and human health, are experiencing the effects of a rapidly changing climate. As there's a cause and effect of climate change that's more profound than the physical damage that we see on the news. We have a climate driver. That's a specific climate change event that leads to an environmental condition. So for example, rising temperatures. And that environmental condition or conditions is what arises in response to a specific climate change event, like longer heat days causing longer pollen seasons or extended spring weather. An environmental hazard is what is directly leads to a negative health effect. So in the longer pollen seasons, we are experiencing more pollination, we're experiencing more hay fever, we're experiencing all these types of conditions that then lead to the health effect. And yes, it could mean more allergies. It could also cause other respiratory illnesses like asthma or COPD. And that the exposure pathway is the environmental condition and hazard that will dictate that cocktail, if you will dictate the specific health impacts felt by a population or an individual. And human health is directly linked to environment around us. The rising temperatures, poor air quality, vector-borne diseases, the storms, the extremes of precipitation, if you will, and much more. And I'll just quickly go through these. When we have extreme heat, we see things like longer and hotter seasons, and it's never the first day of a heat wave. It's usually the third, fourth, fifth day where our systems start having more challenges related to cooling and centering and regulating our body temperature. And then those threats lead to heat stroke, respiratory or heart disease, and sometimes premature death. And of course, air quality is important. Those ambient air pollutants, wildfire smoke, pollen, even mold, when we're talking about how our outdoor air can impact our indoor air. And of course, these go back to those respiratory health impacts, but also heart disease. Here's a graphic from the 2018, beg your pardon, Lancet countdown report. It really just shows all the different ways air pollution, the same pollutants that impact or cause or accelerate climate change, can also impact directly our personal health. And then disease-carrying vectors like insects or animals, we're seeing more of them and migrating to different places because of heat. And we're seeing them in places where they didn't exist before because of things like deforestation or standing water after a storm. And that can lead to, threats like Lyme disease, West Nile virus, and so much more. And then extreme storms, we're talking about hurricanes, superstorms, which lead to flooding, debris, can lead to injury, can lead to respiratory, but also GI illnesses as well, especially when we're talking about damaging infrastructure, especially the storm and sewage systems, drainage systems. And then on the opposite is drought. We talked a little bit about wildfires and brush fires, and it's not so much the fires, they're very devastating as they are. It's also the smoke that travels from those fires that lead to eye irritation, but also injury, and could really lead to those types of respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses. So as you can see, climate change has many forms of impacting our health, and it's really the condition that climate exposure presents itself, and what will it mean for the communities experiencing that condition. When we talk about the health impacts of climate change, we're often focused on the physical conditions, but mental health and wellness are also very important to uplift. There are three main impacts of mental health as I see it. The immediate impact comes from sudden natural disasters, including destructive storms, floods, wildfires, and extreme heat. Natural disasters could cause post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, stress, and sometimes could lead to self-harm, including substance abuse and suicidal ideation. Then there's a more gradual impacts that come from slowly progressing, more long-term conditions associated with climate change or public safety. So these are the types of things that could be brought on by infectious diseases or chronic diseases like allergies and asthma, nutritional deficiencies, and injuries that can contribute to stress. And we now know that chronic stress, stress felt over a long period of time, especially in children, can affect their academic achievement, but also present as developmental delays. And then there's the indirect impacts that come from climate change affecting the way we think about ourselves and each other and the world, our relationship with our community. So after a climate event or resulting displacement, people may experience diminished sense of self or difficulty relating to others, or even reduced social interaction. And the community impacts include domestic abuse and violence, but also can look like economic insecurity and physical damage are also potential effects. So these challenges are exacerbated by health inequities that communities of color and low income or low wealth communities already face. So I'd like to dive a little bit more into the equity conversation. According to the World Health Organization, health equity is achieved when everyone can attain their full potential for health and well-being. And health equity and health are determined by the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, play, age, as well as the biological determinants. Now, structural determinants like political, legal, and economic, with social norms and institutional processes, can shape the distribution of power and resources determined by the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, and age. And health is a basic human right. And if society truly upholds this basic human right, we need to then single out, name, and stop all forms of unfairness that result in differences in conditions that determine the best health outcome. And we need to address the historical and contemporary disparities of racist policies, as well as the institutional nature of power, access, resource, and prejudice, including sex, gender, race, ability, and so much more. Everyone can achieve health when we stop applying the same approach to every circumstance, every person, every community, and every situation. It's not about giving equal access and opportunity. It's about giving equitable access and opportunity. And this is a quote that I absolutely admire from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There are a lot of good intentions, but there may be some unintended consequences to the work that we could potentially be doing. I love this quote by a paper written by Yale. It really talks about the unacceptably high and potentially catastrophic risk climate change poses on human health. And the challenges are can exacerbate health inequities of communities of color and low wealth communities already face. This is a slide from the 4th National Climate Assessment, and I call it the young, the old, the poor, and the different. Because when we look at these four different groups, we're really looking at four different scenarios that require four different types of attention. We start with children. They're not just little people. They breathe in more air and drink more water per body unit than adults. They have developing organs and systems and often lower immunities than adults. And they're more susceptible to heat-related illness and dehydration or diarrheal diseases. And if you look at the other end of the spectrum, older adults may have lower immunity, pre-existing conditions, or limited mobility. Communities of color may be facing challenges with lack of social capital, maybe a language barrier, or could also be living with disabilities and may be affected by historic racist policies. And in low wealth communities, the less resources means less ability to seek reprieve from a high heat day, maybe inadequate structure or infrastructure due to physical damage in the communities could lead to it being harder to evacuate when needed. There may be food and water insecurities as well. There are many other groups that have their unique challenges. I just named four. The others could include outdoor workers, student athletes, rural Native or Indigenous populations, people with disabilities, people living with pre-existing medical conditions or health conditions, and those experiencing houselessness. So why can't we solve this problem at the doctor's office or with a prescription? That's because only 20% of what it takes to attain good health comes from healthcare or medical care. The other 80% that impacts one's ability to achieve good health comes from the social and structural determinants of health. And the non-clinical determinants of health really do play a major role in the way our community can help us thrive or offer barriers or challenges. And here are just a few. Equal access to education is key determinant of reducing or achieving better health. Employment that is safe and has safe and healthy working conditions is also key. And the ability to attain a living wage, which is different than employment, but also feeds into ability to achieve good health. Housing in a decent, affordable living condition, transportation and access to transportation choices, access to affordable and nutritious food, access to affordable Medicare, and just access. A healthy and safe outdoor environment to really build that sense of social cohesion and community safety by way of ensuring people's physical integrity and safety. At the personal level, we know that a person's knowledge is not alone to be blamed for the poor health outcomes because their choices are limited by what's before them. Generational wealth, income, and employment, or lack thereof, can lead to economic circumstances that can hinder a person's ability to stay healthy and or recover from illness. At the community level, structures like cultural norms can impact underlying conditions that can grant or deny circumstances like transportation or housing that can expel participation of certain groups from participating in society. The social determinants of health are underlying social and economic conditions in the community that influence people's ability to be healthy. And at the systemic level, we're talking about the broadest level of the framework that involves systemic causes like the fundamentals of social inequities that lead to poor health. These include, for example, racism, sexism, generational poverty, redlining by financial institutions, Structural racism or racism structures opportunities and assigns values based on a person and how they look. And the resulting conditions enable unfair advantage for some and unfair disadvantage for others. And racism hurts the health of our nation by preventing some people the opportunity to attain the highest level of health. And it is unintentional, but it also can be intentional and operates in various levels of society. Structural racism is a driving force of the social determinants of health, like housing, education, employment, and is a barrier to health equity. A little bit downstream is environmental racism, which is racial discrimination in environmental policymaking. It's the racial discrimination in enforcement of regulations and laws. It's the discrimination in deliberately targeting communities of color for toxic waste disposal or siting of polluting industries. It's racial discrimination in the official sanctioning of life-threatening presence of poisons and pollutants in communities of color. The history of excluding people of color from mainstream environmental groups, decision-making boards and commissions and regulatory bodies have been practices of the past and sometimes in the present. It's these inequities that are created when barriers prevent individuals and communities from accessing the conditions and reaching their fullest potential. Inequities differ from health disparities, which are differences in health status because of people related to social or demographic factors. And since I'm a public health wonk, I'd like to talk to you about solutions through the health equity framework. Using the framework can help us ask guiding questions like, rather than a one-size-fits-all solution. So we want to ask questions like, what counts as equity? Who are we including in these decisions, and what are the parameters? So when we look at distributive equity, we're highlighting the need to not just consider the allocation of benefits, but also the burden. So decisions like justice on merit and need. When we're looking at procedural equity, we're encompassing fairness in the political process and participation in decision-making. And this really is talking about the inclusion, representation, and voice. So if you think back to the parable, this is talking about the walker who wanted the tree canopy in their neighborhood, but the other two didn't really listen. And then contextual equity, recognizing that the playing field is never leveled, but that people's ability to access resources and power determine their ability to engage in the process, whether political or decision-making, so that they can speak for themselves to determine the best distributive outcome. Capabilities, access, and power are in play at this point. Framework that is put before you is extremely scalable. Applying a health equity approach can demonstrate short and long-term inclusion and representation. And communities who live not just in the singular climate event, but from compounding challenges that are the ones that should be leading the conversation from the local level as they know what's best for their communities and families to thrive. Our ability to reimagine a healthy and just future is rooted in our courage to take steps forward in an equitable and sustainable future. The movement requires a wide range of actors from a wide range of sectors to all work together, all the while addressing the historical and contemporary challenges of structural racism and environmental justice. So if the goal of working towards justice is to seek fair outcomes, it's not enough to offer ladders or even a taller one. We need to fix the system to offer equal access to both the tools and the opportunities. So I don't want to leave you in despair, and I'll talk about solutions, and I see some hands raised, so I will get to those in a moment. When we're talking about solutions, funding is always one of those catch-all, we need more money to do better. But there's a way in which money can be allocated. Diversifying the funding opportunities that drives investments into low wealth communities of color is key. Partnering with community groups from the beginning is also an important step, and compensating them for sharing their lived experience and lived realities is very important. And of course, there's policy. Advocate for and adopt voluntary codes, policies, guidelines that promote physical and mental health for people of all ages and abilities and incomes is key. Implementing the planning and development solutions that improve opportunities for physical activity, access to healthy food, healthy indoor and outdoor environments, and social connectedness. So some key policies that are showing health equity aligned with the values of environmental practitioners are included in this national set of recommendations put forth by the 2020 Lancet Countdown on Climate and Health Brief. The first is transition to healthy, sustainable agricultural practices, implement policies and invest programs that can foster improved health from the reduction of particulate air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, such as reducing the use of nitrogen fertilizers. We can remove U.S. fossil fuel subsidies to eliminate and reduce investments in new energy exploration and production, and shift to zero carbon electricity urgently so that it's affordable for everyone. Also, we can increase access to healthy transportation options by investing in and enhancing infrastructure that is affordable and accessible, including zero carbon public transportation, electric vehicles, and charging stations. We can also strengthen public health system by increasing and with increased and sustainable investments that protect against accelerating health threats of climate change, and invest in health recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic that will implement a quadruple benefit, if you will, of COVID recovery that works to stable the climate, protect the public's health, and promote sustainable economy that creates an equitable society. But going back to that list of climate impacts on health or solutions, there's one that's creeping up more in the academic circles, which is data equity. Data collected and interpreted equitably can illuminate where some people and places are cut off from key drivers of health, like nutritious food, good schools, stable and affordable homes, as well as the historic policies like housing discrimination that limit opportunities available in many communities. And building an understanding of health data and establish measurable health objectives for plans and projects is also key. When it comes to partnerships, engaging with community levels by forming coalitions or collaborating with organizations to understand health challenges and devise strategies to address them. And sustainable challenges and transformational changes happen at the speed of trust. Many times it might feel like the community groups we are interested in working with you, when in reality, or may not be interested in working with you, but when in reality, we're not working in the ways that they're accustomed to. It's the authentic relationships that will prove to be the most effective, especially after a climate event, but also in engaging in other opportunities with communities. And then I like to talk about healing and storytelling. There is a vital need to bring together grassroots organizations and the big greens to create space for healing and build a path forward together to co-create in new ways to spark collaboration and innovation at the intersection of climate, justice, and health. Done the right way with trust, the commitment to action and support can follow through. And this has had profound impacts in strengthening more cohesive movement. And lastly, power building. Power building is about expanding organizational capacity and leadership development, as some of you already know and are already doing. And some of the community leaders in climate and justice space are seeking at this very moment. So here are just a few ways that this conversation can be moved forward in your locality. I find it that each person focused on the problem and the solution directly before them to benefit themselves and their neighbors alone is kind of the challenge here. It's so important to draw back that it's the teaching, it's the collective view, it's the collective way, the bigger picture when we see the whole truth and the many truths that rest within the climate challenge, the many perspectives that really will come to the best solution for the communities and the environments we're seeking to protect, seeking to serve. So with that, thank you very much again for your time and for the invitation to speak. And I see a few questions and hands raised, so I will turn it over to Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Surili. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you being here with us this evening, sharing your perspective and your knowledge. And yeah, if you have a few minutes, we do have a few questions. I'd like to start with the one that's posted in the Q&A, and then we'll work on promoting and allowing the people with their hands raised to ask their questions. So Rosella Clyde has a big question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. The challenges, I'll read it out for everyone who might not be able to see it. The challenges have been documented, but those who have the resources don't want to lose their privileges. The biggest challenge is to get them to understand the equity requirements. How do we address those educational challenges?
Love this question. And if I had an answer to this, I don't think I would be speaking to you tonight, unfortunately. The education and bringing and lifting up this conversation to the various audiences is part of that bigger picture on society. At Metropolitan Group, we do a lot of work on narrative. And in the dominant narrative, it's often we see the me versus we that wins over. What also is helping shift that narrative from profits to benefiting society are values, underlying values that we have shared with those who are that may hold the power. The slide on solutions that I was talking about around power building, power sharing, the ways in which we need to heal the big greens with communities, I think those are all starting points. We're at an inflection point, I feel, where more community groups are talking more about or getting more visibility. So one thing is to lift up and share stories is incredibly important, and share those lived experiences. Also, talking to non-traditional partners is also key. I have a little anecdotal story, which is, I spoke to the CEO of a no-named Fortune 500 company who said, why should I help those people? It's going to cut into my profits. And I said, well, if you don't help all people, it's going to cut into your profits. There is that shared value of profits. So it's a matter of, yes, sharing the equity lens, but also finding what values resonate with the person or the group you're speaking with. It's a great question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we're all trying to work on the answer to that, as you started off with. We also have a hand raise from Richard Kent. And so we're going to change his designated status with us this evening. So Richard, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question of Surili. Oh, Richard, you're still muted. Looked like you weren't muted for a second. You could go ahead and try to unmute yourself again. You should be able to. down in the lower left-hand corner, there should be a little radio microphone. And if you click on that, it should unmute you. Nope. All right. Well, we will keep trying to get Richard's question. I saw him unmuted for a second there. Not sure what happened. If you have any other questions of our speaker, you can go ahead and either type that in our Q&A, or you can use the raised hand button. And we will try to promote you to a position where you're able to speak electronically with us. Okay. Well, with that, Richard, I'm really sorry we weren't able to get your question. If you want to send us an email or type it in the chat, then we'll go ahead and if you type it in the chat, we'll try to answer it tonight. Or if you send us an email, if it's something for ANJAC, we'll go ahead and respond to you as soon as possible. But Surili, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I look forward to having opportunity and cause to work with you again in the future. And, you know, as we work on this journey together to make a more equitable and just New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody else for being here with us this evening. If you'll hang on just a few quick minutes, we have some final announcements. So we've got a lot of folks with us still. I promise I won't take long. So again, if you join us in the conversation on Twitter, we're at ANJAC Tweets and we're using hashtag EnviroCongress. We'll post all the sessions on our YouTube channel in the weeks to come at ANJAC Views. I want to ask you if you will please consider taking a very short survey. It's only 5 questions. And the wonderful benefit here is that we have curated a from New Jersey box of goodies that we will send to a person at random. We will have a drawing on Friday for those who have completed the survey. I just posted the link in the chat. It's a bit.ly link, ANJAC survey, just 5 questions. We want to know how we can continue to bring you quality program that matters to you and your community. We have more than doubled participation and attendance in ANJAC events during the pandemic. We know that you are attending these programs from communities where you may not have been able to get to us before, either from transportation issues or because, oh, we're an awfully big little state and it takes a long time to drive places. We know childcare and elder care issues. So we want to keep the accessibility that the pandemic has brought to our programs, but we also want to continue to serve you in the way that you want to attend our programming. 5 short questions, please answer this bit.ly survey and some lucky person will get a New Jersey curated box of goodies and we'll do that drawing on Friday. We invite you to join us for the rest of this week. We have wonderful sessions over the next 3 days. Tomorrow at noon, we are speaking with Candace Perry from the DEP and Renata Barnes from Outdoor Equity Alliance about advancing environmental justice in New Jersey. We're talking about stormwater at 4 o'clock with Dr. Chris Abrupta from Rutgers and Brianna Callahan from New Jersey Future. And then at 7 p.m., we're going to wrap up the day with Henry Gaida from New Jersey League of Conservation Voters and our very own Alex Ambrose to talk about what's happening in the end of the legislative session between now and January. So there's going to be vote-a-ramas happening in New Jersey. So come learn what's happened and what's pending and how you can get engaged. Thursday, we're going to talk about climate change, climate action. Then we're going to talk about electric vehicles at 4 o'clock and close out the day with energy, speaking with Crystal Pruitt from the BPU, Tom Gilbert from NJCF. And then on Friday, we have Commissioner LaTourette joining us. So we hope you'll be able to tune in and hear about the direction of our DEP and what's to come. We're going to talk about social media tools and networking. ECs have been doing a fantastic job with networking in their communities throughout the pandemic. So learn what others are doing and how you can do it even better in your community. And then please join us in the evening with a beverage of your choice as we celebrate the service and leadership of two New Jersey senators who are retiring from our legislature. Both Senator Kip Bateman and Senate Majority Leader Weinberg will join us on Friday evening as we close out with some celebration and fun for our 48th annual and second virtual Environmental Congress. And I could not let you go without saying a word about voting. If you need any additional information about voting, you can go to vote.nj.gov. That's vote.nj.gov. We have early voting in New Jersey for the first time ever. So the polls open October 23rd through the 31st. If you need information on that, 564 municipalities and 21 counties, lots of different information out there. Go to vote.nj.gov to get the best and most up-to-date info. And then, of course, Election Day itself is November 2nd. Yes, it's almost November. So thank you. We're still coming to you from our couches with our fluffies, our kitties and our puppies and our laptops. So we're here to service you and your needs for your community. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being with us this evening. You know how to reach us, you know how to find us because we hear from you all the time. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and throughout the week. And I wish you a wonderful Tuesday evening. Thank you, everybody.